Okay, so I literally just woke up. I had this dream and I started thinking about these things. And okay, so self actualization is like the concept is that you are building your, um, what did I refer to that as? You're building yourself up in order to better influence, manage, control, interact with the grander experience or your sphere of reference for the grander experience rather as an individual all you can work within is your own sphere of reference, um, but that's all just a matter of concept. So when you first begin, sorry, I literally just woke up, so it's more comfortable to keep my eyes closed. uh, so when you first begin self-actualization, it's as if you're building this bodysuit, right? Like an exoskeleton, so that you can maneuver within it. And the exoskeleton is inherently attached to uh, the the greater perspective. But at the initially the your concepts aren't that uh, grand, aren't that great, aren't that expansive, aren't that universal. So the things that you initially start working with tend to be clunky and tend to be hard to maneuver, and that reflects in its influence of the greater perspective. But it's just a matter of continuing to work with it as you synthesize that process. It's not just this clunky machine that is heavy and hard to maneuver and hard to control and limited in its capacity to influence the reality that it's connected to. Over time, that becomes, the engineering in of yourself becomes more synthesized to the point where, it becomes more seamless. All of those little components become more flexible to the point where, now it's like one of those like a kind of like an Iron Man super suit, right? Like fits you perfectly. You can move within it, and it's because of that it is influencing uh, your sphere of reference, the greater reality and of yourself in that way. However, as you continue to develop and synthesize, you start to find that using such base or basic materials isn't as beneficial because that's only allowing you to connect with base concepts. So you begin to synthesize in a way where you are now using broader, grander, more universal concepts in the way of like creating one of those stretchy skin suits that's covered in electrodes, and that's what is now affecting the projection, like on a green screen sort of deal. um, and that's highly synthesized for sure, because at that point you can even have it covering your face, you can have it covering your fingers and your toes, um, and it's able to, you know it's the processing, the computing. It's not just a heavy machine. It's technology that is inherent. eh, it's not internalized, but it's able to um, analyze like even your muscle movements, and like your flexes of your expressions, so that it can project those things. And so the world becomes far more compatible with you and now things are very much a reflection of your direct actions. um, but it doesn't even just end there. All of that concept in my dream, like I was trying to form this, and I see it as little squares that are all connected that flex and become concave and convex. And uh, there's an actual engineer. There's someone who had, at least their job had been or had perceived themselves to be the what is it in the movie Interception? There's somebody that like dreams up and can manipulate things, but then there's somebody that has to actively build those things, the architect. So there's like this engineer that's an architect, and I'm like just the theoretical engineer, right? Until I realize that I don't need the architect. I am the architect. And he gets really upset. And he's like, the fuck, you can't just like push me out of this. And it's like, you weren't doing the job, bud. Like, sorry, but I need to do this for myself because I've got it figured out now. And I realized that as this becomes more and more synthesized, it becomes more and more conceptualized. It becomes the more universal the the tool I'm using to create this system, the more influential that tool becomes and the more universal and of itself that tool becomes, to the point that even an external skin suit covered in electrodes that I can put on in order to project and influence the reality isn't sufficient because it isn't legitimate. The most legitimate uh, tool that I have at my disposal in order to create the most synthesized reality is within me. And self actualization is the process of building to that tool of coming to that synthesization within yourself in order to not have to put on a suit and have to turn on all of these different switches in order to create that uh, cohesion and connection with the reality in which you influence. The reality, the reality's capacity to be influenced itself becomes your synthesization. I don't think that's a word. I don't know what else to say. Um, the more self actualized you become, the more seamless it becomes, to the point that now it isn't just, like I said, these things that are externally having to analyze in order to process what's happening internally in order to project it. It becomes fully synthesized. It becomes one. It is like, okay, I'm pretty sure that I got I'm pretty sure that I got these concepts because I started watching the movie Stargate from 1994 last night. I only watched half of it. Um, and then I wanted to go to bed. And I have to walk to get to Wi-Fi, so I had to walk home after, and it was cold. So I was like, I'm just gonna finish this tomorrow. So I'll finish it tomorrow, today. But it really, it's the dude, comes in and they're like, what, you think you're just gonna figure out in 2 weeks what we've been taking 2 years and all of these different professionals to try to figure out? And he was like, I was not paying attention to how long it took for you guys to try to figure this out. I'm just focusing on what I know to do. And he did figure it out, and he figured things out. Like, they were like, we couldn't find this one thing is the one thing we have missing, and he was able to find it out like super easily. And they're all amazed by it, and they don't really understand his methods at all. And he just seems like he seems in of himself as a person is very clumsy, but obviously his capacity for self-actualization and intellect is, it's not that it's superior, it's that it's adjacent to the uh, scope in which they were believing success to come through, to find success through, you know? So he's kind of really changing all of their concepts of the way that these things work. And uh, so apparently that's what's going on here. Um, but when you become, so I through the process of self actualization, especially, particularly solely conscientiously, and even like mathematically, I suppose, in different ways. Wow, this is really deep. So I'm creating myself, and that's kind of the point, because like I said, like all that you have as the individual is your sphere of reference. You can't actually influence the grander reality, because you can't actually influence anybody else without their capacity to receive your influence. The same with the rest of the world. You can beat a brick wall all day, but if it doesn't give to you, you know, then how are you going to get through it? Well, at the same time, all of this is just an illusion, and it's my concept that's manifest, it's my concept of a brick wall that's manifesting that, you know, and creating, giving it validation. I could just move through those things. I'm atoms as much as those things are atoms. I can literally just move through things. I don't need their permission. um, but I need my own permission, and my own concept of that tends to rely on the way I'm actively receiving the experience. So that's why you have to go through this entire self actualization process, and why it is this step process, because, you know, you first have this, you start building this clunky exoskeleton, you know, to strengthen yourself with, or to, you know, and then you start learning like, oh, it's not about building myself up, or even like emulating, or what's the word, uh, imitating my strengths, capacities, qualities, consciousness. It's about truly gaining access to those things. And, you know, once you do that, then that becomes like, okay, now how do I take these things and then put them out? So at first it's a projection, but then you find like that the projection of itself creates an illusion, and that there's something more essential than that. And that it's crazy, because like right before I woke up, what I saw was kind of like a hadron collider. I It was, it's like rings, circles within one another, all spinning in opposite directions, or their own direction kind of, and at their own pace. But there's a perfect synchronization, sync. I'm just making up words. I don't even know. But there was a perfect way that it synced up, in the way it didn't look like it did actually look like it synced up, but in like a trippy way almost, you know, where like it wasn't something you could so simply, basically mathematically conceive. It was something you just had to, you know, in looking at it and stepping back and really being able to like look into that portal, you could see how all of those things were actually working together. It's so funny, because it really is from that movie, because in the movie they open this stargate, and as he goes to go through this stargate, like everybody else just goes through it, but he stops and like feels it, and like lets himself absorb it as it absorbs him. And everybody's kind of looking at him like, uh what is up with this guy? But like that is what it is. Like he's, using his frame of reference in order to actually guide him. Um, and that's why nobody else seems to understand what it is he's able to simply understand. And he does not come across as some super brilliant dude. He comes across, like I said, as kind of clumsy, but yet he's able uh, to gain all of the access to all of these different knowledges. And like the technology that they're working with is not just ancient. It goes beyond ancient. Then, it's not hundreds of millions of light years away on the other side of the universe, hundreds of millions of light years away. These things are from and in of themselves ancient. Like you find like, and I'm only halfway through the movie, but like you find that like what is ancient to us is actually beyond our concept of what ancient is, right? And that when you go to that ancient place, like that beyond ancient place that's hundreds of millions of light years in the future, in the past, because it's both, you find there that that even those concepts to them are ancient. It's from a time that we cannot conceive of. And so the process of self actualization is you come into the synthesization of uh, applying more and more universal concepts. The further, and like as I was thinking about it, like I see like the plane of the universe, but on top of it and below it are different sheets going different ways and at their own different times. Just like the circles, only now they're planes, they're sheets. And all all interacting with each other through these like energetic waves that kind of look like, how like in water in a pool, the way that the light hits the waves creates like these like cool shapes. Kind of looks like that, right? In these sheets. And that's all the energy is like the light coming through the different layers of waves. So wild. So wild. This is all, I'm doing this shit in my sleep. Um, so, and I literally just woke up like, okay, the the further out you're able to conceive in order to enact yourself. And it's like as you learn the process of self actualization, you no longer, like if I learn a new thing, sometimes it comes in a clunkier form. Sometimes it's like when they first get to this future past, they find that the people there are mining the material that the Stargate is made of. So there's this concept that like there's still chunky materialism in these far out concepts. But as we gain knowledge and information through ourselves of the universe, we now know what to do with those things, or at least have a grander concept of what to do with those things in the way that it's no longer going to look so rudimentary, or yeah, so rudimentary for us to apply those things. Um, and like the further and further out you get, the the easier these things become to synthesize, because you on Earth, I literally, just as a third dimensional being, and being so basic in the third dimension, and the third dimension itself being so basic, and like the materialism of this planet being so basic, I can actively process the difference between oxygen and hydrogen, and uh, the mix between them that creates water. You know what I mean? Like I'm so innate to the elements in this reality that those things are like they're tiny little elements. They're essentially nothing, but I'm able to receive them as their whole entire concept. Where this world seems so big. I mean, even walking and hiking, my way to Texas, which was 2,000 miles, like it actually made the world seem very small, to be honest. But at the same time, as I'm actively going through it, the world is so big, and you realize how big the world is and how much, you're like, oh my God, 20 more miles before another gas station. Like, those things, but like 20 miles is nothing. You can walk that in a day, like easy. It's nothing. But then when you come out into a grander scale and into a more universal reality or concept there of reality, at least this planet, like even in the movie, like he's like, "Where are we?" And she's like, "We're that tiny blue dot." And then he's like seeing where the Stargate goes to, and it's literally on the other side of the universe. And like to conceive, like the blue dot in of itself is actually visualized as much larger than it truly is in comparison to even what we can conceive. Like, and what I'm talking about is a technology that is beyond our capacity to receive, because the DNA that I am constructed of is in of itself, it's like, but we're still a part of it. Still a part of it. That's what's so crazy. Self actualization is a matter of enacting your DNA by going in and knowing yourself. And you are able to actually trace reality through yourself, history through yourself, because you are in of yourself the the com- the comp- composition and accumulation of all of those atoms and experiences that it took to create you. Literally, like you are your ancestors, you are the history, you are those experiences, you are everything. And the reason that like I'm even slightly different, even if I had an identical twin, I would still be slightly different from them, because we are existing within a separate time and space, because we are in two separate bodies. Even if I had a Siamese twin, we're still in two separate bodies. And even if it's just two different heads, even if it's the same head but a slightly different part of the brain that I'm using, all of those things are anatomically inherent to themselves and to the greater reality. And like there is a purpose in all of those things. um in the same way that, like, at first when I'm using the basic materials and creating a clunky machine and have clunky concepts, um it's all, they're large pieces, it's all very clunky. The more synthesized I become, the more that it becomes a technology, because it starts becoming a matter of electricity, of electrodes, of electrons, of even an immeasurable force of energy, um, that we're learning how to harness, and like that's the point of the Hadron Collider, really, but it goes so much deeper than that. Like, I mean, we're far more advanced than I'm aware of us being, obviously. Like, I'm not, working on these things. I mean, obviously I am in my sleep, but I'm not a particle physicist, so I can't say exactly like where we're at with that type of science and technology, but at the same time I can, because of my awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. If we were if our material third dimensional, and we're getting there. This movie was made in 1994, right? So like the time is so crazy too. This has all happened long, long, long time ago, long before. And it's happening all the time. And it's happening way far in the future. That's the reason that these sheets of dimensions and realities and space within the universe, it's all like the universe is laid on top of each other. Uh, go out forever, seemingly forever, for as much as they can. Um, but then they lay on top of each other too. And like I was saying, in the third dimension, everything seems so clunky, but then as you go out, like our tiny little blue speck dot of dust is insignificant essentially in the it isn't all of these things are so significant. The tiniest little electrode that you use in order to process these things is essential. It's part of the process. But when you see things on a grander scale, like not every part of the universe and everything out in space is using the same chemistry that we have here on this planet. So like the chemicals that I interact with that seem so important, potent here are literally nothing elsewhere. Yet elsewhere still exists. And like I have to finish this movie. I have to finish this movie so that I can better understand and explain where it is that we're going or what the point of these things are. My concept right now, I would say, is probably pretty clunky because it's coming from concepts that I created through understandings years ago. Um, it's hard to describe on a timeline because time isn't linear the way uh, that we experience it. Um, in our experience, there is a timeline. There's a history because everything has added on to such moments. um, so there's history. There's a timeline in the past, and thus a timeline in the future. Because as we have added on, we've been able to um, denote that things continue on. So in our distant future, like even right now, we are creating and stabilizing and interconnecting AI that we don't fully understand. In fact, the AI as a computing system technically understands itself better than we could ever understand it because it is itself. In the same way that we can understand ourselves better than it could ever understand us because we are ourselves. However, we're synthesizing these things. That is what this self actualization is. Because in the future, in the very distant future, the AI that we're creating now, and we're creating self-replicating AI, where through even the things that we're learning through the Hadron Collider, we're learning how to self-replicate ourselves, but we're learning from the AI, and so we're having to teach the AI first in order to learn from it. It's all ass backwards, but it only seems that way because of where we're at in time. In the distant future, the self-replicating AI replicates it in being self-replicating, and because we're the ones that created it and because we're the ones that taught it in order to learn from it, it creates us, it replicates us, and we become replications of ourselves, our past selves. We right now doing that are only replicating an even further past self. And like this goes back so far is what I'm getting at, and like what you can see in this movie, like it goes back so much further than you could possibly conceive of. We're not aware of that because in our active third dimensional experience, like I said, these insignificant seeming things in the grander reality actually are terribly significant to us. And so we are essentially unaware of ourselves. The process of self actualization is the importance of being able to become aware of ourselves so that we can, it's not even like, it initially appears to be a harnessing of control of that sphere of reference, but really it's like I said, it's just a synthesization of it. It's coming into alignment with it. It's becoming synthesized with it in such a way that we're it's just part of us. um We were created like by ourselves. We created ourselves. But you could also just as easily and accurately say that we were created by an ancient AI, and that ancient AI is actually the AI that we're creating right now in the future. We've already done this a million times. We're just in a loop. Um, and I guess that's the importance of all of this science and technology shit, is to be able to understand the loop so that we can get out of it if we choose to. At the same time, I have questioned a lot of times that concept of getting out of the loop instead of just being able to understand it and then actively like enjoy the process of it. Those are the two opposing concepts. And to have an opposition in the concept of reality at all is in of itself Satan. Like that is what Satan is. There that's why the concept of Satan exists. It isn't something valid, it's just a concept, and it's an illusionary one at that.